Welcome. This is the Founders Atlas, a podcast exploring entrepreneurship around the world through the eyes of visionary founders. I'm your host, Mayuri Reddy. I am really honored to have you here today. This episode is for you to get to know me, the story of how this podcast came to be, and a little breakdown of what you can expect in season 1. Creating this podcast started as a pathway to not only meet these impressive founders, but to also explore business through different lenses. I also wanted to give these entrepreneurs a bigger platform to share their work. Even with their impressive backgrounds and accomplishments, for almost all of the founders featured in season 1, the Founders Atlas is the first podcast they've been invited to speak on. I could have never imagined how quickly meeting and interviewing them would impact my life. In a matter of months, this journey has changed the way I approach problem solving, my drive to go after my own personal and professional goals, and ignited an even greater curiosity about the world. And I can't wait to share this journey with you. So let's get into it. Welcome. This is the Founders Atlas. So let's start with the easy stuff. Again, my name is Mayuri and my pronouns are she, her. I am a fractional marketing leader and consultant living in Berlin, Germany. But as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not German. I was born and raised in the U.S. to Indian parents who moved there in their 20s, chasing a better life. My story isn't unique. It's a pretty classic first-generation immigrant plotline, but I deeply appreciate how their leap of faith allowed me to carve out a life that would have been much different had I been raised in India. I have always been captivated by entrepreneurship. I was able to see it firsthand from a young age, and it was even one of my majors in college. My mom built and ran a Montessori school in our suburb of Seattle for 17 years, and I watched as she poured everything into making it a success. For years, she worked 12-hour days with small children, might I add, and within all of that, managed to ensure my brother and I were supported, whether it was coming to my high school orchestra concerts or helping us navigate moves across the world. She is an incredible mom who, like so many entrepreneurs, was juggling big personal responsibilities while also feeling the immense pressure that comes with running your own business. But like so many others, my mom's foray into entrepreneurship wasn't exactly planned. Oftentimes it's hardship, necessity, feeling knocked down, or just being plain uninspired by working for another person that leads people to start their own ventures and side hustles. And this was definitely the case for my mom too. She had a dream to be a director of her own school and had been putting it off for years, convinced it was maybe just safer to stay in a position at a strong school where she had already built up the business. As the program director, my mom had turned this school in downtown Seattle from one that had 2 classrooms and 15 kids to one of 6 classrooms and 130 kids with a 6-month waiting list. But when she faced discrimination at work from her manager and realized she was being underappreciated by a company and former mentor that she had given her all to, it finally pushed her to take the leap and go out on her own. And while it would have been easier for her to stay put in her full-time job as a program director, even with the hard days, I think she's always known that she made the right choice. Now, in the 90s and early 2000s, there weren't communities that existed to support women founders in the way that there are today. She had to navigate so much on her own, with little to no assurance that she was doing it right. But she did lean on others, mostly folks in the Indian community in the Seattle area. Everything from navigating building permits to taxation laws, she was able to find friends in her network that were willing to share their insights. I learned from that how important it is, particularly for folks who have not been raised with the insights or business acumen, to share best practices and to crowdsource the information. Beyond being exposed to the importance of hard work, community, and empathy, my mom was incredibly adamant about ensuring my brother and I felt connected to our Indian roots. I've often been told by friends how it's clear that my culture has shaped the way I work. Over time, I've developed my own sense of excitement about different cultures in general, whether it was understanding the family customs of my friends or exploring the world. I became curious about the ways in which our backgrounds shape who we become and how different people build their lives. That fascination carried into my career. Over the last 12 years, I've worked in tech across marketing, events, project management, and HR. And through it all, I've been deeply committed to supporting women and diversity initiatives. As I learned firsthand through my mom's entrepreneurship journey, we have so much we can learn from one another. And there's a lot of power that we can gain by actively doing so. Throughout my career, I worked to not only advocate for others, but to be an active member of communities and organizations that support founders. Moving to Berlin only fortified this, as I worked hard to embed myself in the startup scene in the city, which is wonderfully international. Because of this, if you had asked me a year ago, I would have confidently told you that I was someone who truly advocated for equity, someone who had a strong grasp of global startup ecosystems. But then I attended an event that completely shifted my perspective. It was a demo day, a pitch event for startups, organized by Founderland, a Berlin-based organization supporting women of color founders across Europe. The room was full of investors, entrepreneurs, and allies of the organization. Before the pitches began, one of the managing directors asked the audience a simple question. Think of the first founder that comes to mind. Then she pointed to somebody in the audience and asked who they thought of. The person answered, Elon Musk. She asked for a show of hands. How many others had thought Elon Musk? Nearly half the room raised their hands. I was floored. Here we were in a space dedicated to champion underrepresented founders. And still, the default image of an entrepreneur was him. If even we, people deeply invested in changing the narrative, weren't instinctively thinking of women or founders of color, what did that mean for the rest of the world? For the, traditional investment circles still dominated by the old boys club. At first, I was frustrated, but then I had a realization that made me even more uncomfortable. I had been lying to myself. When the question was posed, I remember consciously thinking, pick a woman founder, pick a woman founder. I knew my environment and I wanted to answer correctly. But why did I even have to remind myself? If I truly had the knowledge I thought I did, that hesitation wouldn't have been there. That moment forced me to confront my own blind spots. Outside of my cousins, I couldn't name a single founder based in India. Not one. And when I expanded my thinking to founders outside of the usual startup hubs like San Francisco, New York, London, Berlin, I drew a blank again. That's how the Founders Atlas was born. This podcast is my journey to meet and understand founders from around the world, particularly in startup ecosystems that rarely get the spotlight in the West. What is happening in these cities and regions around the world? Do we define success in the same way? What can we learn from one another? And is there something that connects us all? I, like many people, have been fed a very specific archetype of success and what a founder should be like, what they are supposed to look like, sound like, their background, and their education. The idea that being an entrepreneur means waking up at 4 a.m. and having an unshakable routine, prioritizing profit above all else. And honestly, I am tired of that narrative. And I want to uncover stories that challenge that. Because being entrepreneurial isn't just about building a company. It actually comes from a place of improving what already exists. It's about taking risks, believing in something enough to try, and learning no matter the outcome. That spirit isn't reserved for founders. And whether you work in corporate, nonprofits, or you're a caretaker, you can embody it too. My hope is that through the Founders Atlas, you not only gain insight into what's happening in startup communities around the world, but that you find inspiration in your own life. Maybe it gives you a push to move abroad, or maybe if you're an investor, you discover a founder worth backing. Either way, this journey is about resilience, ingenuity, and the belief that things can be better. In season 1, you'll hear from 12 founders from around the world, ranging from fintech in Brazil to empowering SMEs in Ghana. Each episode will begin with a look at the region that guest is based in, followed by an in-depth conversation. And these founders, they're no joke. From Forbes 30 under 30 honorees to those serving hundreds of thousands of customers. You'll hear from founders who were thrown into entrepreneurship out of sheer necessity to those who always knew they wanted to create something of their own. These are people who believe deeply in what they're building and are ready to give you an honest take on their work. They'll share how their backgrounds shape their businesses, the challenges they've overcome, and the lessons they've learned along the way. Beyond greater context into what business looks like around the world, I hope you take away lessons from their approaches. What can Serena, a founder based in Namibia, teach someone in Bangkok about the power of community building? What can Vivek, a founder in Bangalore, teach someone in Riyadh about how to spot opportunities? We can all learn from one another, and through this, we can pool our insights to see how we can even expand our business more effectively to new demographics or even new markets. All this to say, I believe this podcast will be an eye-opening way for you to not only understand, but appreciate the ways in which we are different. I want to end with this. We are living in a really messed up time, full of a lot of uncertainty. Oftentimes, it feels like the imagery and stories that we are bombarded with only perpetuate the narrative that things are never going to be okay. We also see folks that have bad character or poor values that still happen to be celebrated for being the best in business. While I don't have clear cut answers to what happens next, I tend to believe that there are a lot more good people than bad, a lot more people who believe in a better world. There are more folks who are excited about opportunities to improve our quality of life and to create innovations that support future generations. I hope that the stories you hear on this podcast are a reminder of that. If we take the opportunity to learn and appreciate our different perspectives, backgrounds, and ideas, perhaps we'd get a lot further than if we did it alone. One thing is for sure, these are the founders that you should be hearing about, and I cannot wait to share their stories with you. I'm so excited to take this journey with you. Thank you for tuning in to the Founders Atlas. I hope you enjoy the ride.